everybody, and welcome back to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. We're very sorry we're a day late, but it has been a pretty hectic 2 weeks for us, I'd say.
Yes, we've been all over the country.
Yeah, we keep trying to remember all of the places we've been, but then we keep forgetting them because it's been a really packed 2 weeks, I think, give or take. Yeah, we started in Chicago. Thank you to everybody who came out to our 3-part talk on training like a boss, eating right, and riding happy. Super fun night over at the Edge Athlete Lounge, which is really focused on athlete recovery, which I thought was super cool.
Yeah, it's a great center. They have contrast tubs, so a hot and a cold tub. They have the what I call moon boots, but your sort of compression boots that sort of pump air to sort of compress the legs, but they also have lots of things so the athletes can train as well to justify using such things. So they have a kicker trainer studio set up so people can ride their bikes and watch, their numbers or watch movies. The ladies that were in there just before had secretly switched from the data-driven screen to, I think, like a soap opera or something. So yeah. They said they were enjoying their show while while riding. And then there's a couple people just doing treadmill intervals and stuff on some pretty fancy treadmills. So definitely if you can get into that area, into Chicago, and check out all Chicago has, but then also drop into the Edge Performance Studio?
Lounge.
They also have comfy chairs, so yeah. A lot of people enjoyed the compression boots while they watched our Consummate Athlete talk, which is Molly's saddle sore talk combined with her nutrition talk, and then also combined with some training ideas from me.
Yeah, so we had a really good time there. Then it was on to Madison, where we were helping some racers, Jeremy Powers and Ellen Noble specifically, race in the cyclocross races there against some of Europe's best cross racers. So that was an insane, thing to watch. We also got to check out the Trek Precision Fit stuff in their headquarters in Waterloo, which was super cool for me, especially since I have the second edition of Saddle Sore coming out in just a month. So figuring out some of the ways that they're doing really cool stuff with fit and pressure sensing was really interesting for me. I liked they did some minor testing on me to sort of show me how the stuff works, and I was very happy. They kept referring to some of my, we'll call them issues, as functional versus structural. I hate it when people tell me I have different length legs without actually doing an x-ray when I know I'm just kind of off balance and I could fix it. So it was cool that they were like, yeah, it's probably a functional thing for you, not that your legs are just stuck at two different lengths and you're never going to be able to fix it.
Well, and that's often the case with a lot of different things. It might even be the case that you do have some sort of leg length discrepancy, but we always have to step back and ask, is that a normal human condition that, not all the bones develop at, exactly the same range. So, definitely we want to be careful whenever we're talking about pain or abnormalities, because we all have those and the body does adapt and is functional. So indeed, sort of letting people know that it's not the end of the world, and certainly by just pulling on someone's legs and comparing how far their feet go down a table is not necessarily the most accurate way we can diagnose those things, but might help inform decisions we make in the bike fit if it is apparent. And this was the next step they took, was taking that as sort of a clue or an indicator and then sort of combining that with what you're seeing when someone actually gets on the bike, because it could be the case that you don't see any sort of compensation or the opposite compensation you would expect, in which case obviously things are functioning fine, or at least differently than the leg length discrepancy might make you think.
Whew. All right. Well, we're 4 minutes in and still talking about the first weekend of travel. So on that note, I think we should probably shift gears and get into today's episode, which is with Adam McLellan of Parkour Generations. I tried parkour probably a year ago now, and the one class I went to, I absolutely loved. I had so much fun. I met so many cool people. I've been dying to get back to it. But I just really think it's great, especially for somebody like me who loves trail running. I found just the one class helped my trail running so much. You don't really think about parkour as something that helps you kind of on a day-to-day thing, but it's so much about body awareness that I think it can pretty much help any sport.
Yeah, I definitely went into it a little skeptical, but there's a few things in here that I think are going to be beneficial before you sort of guffaw and turn off if you haven't already from our rambling. But the coaching certification process with parkour is actually one of the most stringent I've seen. And that's one of my favorite questions to ask coaches, is sort of their path to coaching. And so that was interesting and intriguing to just hear how hard their fail rate was. Something like, or pass rate was 40%, I believe.
I think it was lower.
So indeed, that's, intriguing that they have that certification process, and something that other sports or other coaches or administrators might want to hear about and then look into. The other interesting thing is, indeed, as Molly says, that everyday life application of parkour is, one, it's a cool community, but two, it's, something you can use if you're a runner, if you're cycling. Certainly there's a line choice, bouncing between things. But, I went on just a real casual hike, as a sort of thing around when we got married in Ellicottville with my parents. And, as we get older, it's our ability to do things like, step over a half a foot or a foot sort of gap in two rocks. It's not that big of a deal, but there's a large mental component, which we talk a lot about in this podcast, the mental component of doing these parkour, or, just stepping between things, jumping between things, precision jumps. There's a lot of that stuff that does apply to everyday life, and, I think will help with successful aging. So I think really packed episode, and one that, I went into thinking, might not be the most exciting, but one that I think has a lot of really good content. So I hope you enjoy it.
Consummate Athlete Podcast here with Adam McLellan of Parkour Generations. So first of all, hi Adam. Welcome to the Consummate Athlete Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So first of all, where is Parkour Generations located for those of us who don't know?
Well, Parkour Generations is everywhere. It sounds strange to say that, but it's true. We're actually an international organization, originally based in London and across the UK. But we now have branches in Brazil, Korea, Americas, across the states of America, of course. So we're pretty expansive. So most of the places you look, you will probably find Parkour Generations.
Very cool. And where are you yourself based out of?
I'm personally based in the Lehigh Valley area of Pennsylvania, and that's where we have the Lehigh Valley branch, Parkour Generations Lehigh Valley branch here.
Yeah, which, I mean, is how I, came to know you guys, because I am originally from Hunterdon County, and actually probably almost a year ago now, I read the book Natural Born Heroes, and they briefly mentioned parkour, and I got, absolutely obsessed with finding a place, and stumbled on Parkour Generations, and took one class, but sadly I was not around enough to keep it up.
It's funny you mentioned that. Chris McDougall, the author, is a Lancaster local, and Parkour Generations Lancaster is another Parkour Generations branch here in Pennsylvania. And he's trained there. I've met Chris several times. He and Parkour Generations partner up somewhat regularly. We've done performances with him and gone on his book tours. He's a really cool guy. Much of his parkour inspiration comes from it. And actually, the beginning of his book features a story of how he got involved with parkour, and he talks about a guy named Andy Keller and a guy named Adam, and that's the two of us here in Pennsylvania.
So cool! Oh my gosh!
I know. I'll be taking autographs anytime after this.
Seriously. That's awesome. Yeah, I really loved reading about that. That was definitely the highlight of the book for me, and I really enjoyed the one class I did make it to in Pennsylvania. Sadly, we bounce around quite a bit, so it's really hard to ever get in the practice of going to one class, but it's definitely something I would pursue. But let's get back to you. So how did you, first of all, give us a brief bio. How did you come to be into parkour?
So parkour for me was, it started when I was a teenager, slightly older teenager. And once upon a time, parkour wasn't something where there were gyms everywhere and sort of most people knew about it, and there were coaches everywhere trying to get you to sign up for classes. It was quite the opposite. Very few people knew about parkour, and if you knew about it and you wanted to learn it, you were pretty much out of luck. And so the only people who knew about parkour were sort of internet geeks, because that's the only real way to find out. This was about 10 or 11 years ago now. So I saw it on the internet. I happened to come across some random videos of these French guys and these Russian guys jumping off stuff and doing crazy things. And I thought that's pretty cool. I'd already been doing martial arts, so I was kind of interested in, disciplines and training methods. So parkour seemed really cool to me. So a few friends and I, we started going out and basically copying videos, which isn't the best idea. I'm sure we'll talk more about training methods later, but copying videos is sort of the equivalent of finding some random person to fight in a boxing ring and calling yourself a boxer. It's not quite the same. So we did that for a while, and then fast forward a couple of years, and I met a guy in Hawaii named Ozzy. I lived in Hawaii for a year, and he was a very experienced and skilled practitioner. He was developing a community there in Hawaii, and sort of brought me on board to help because I had some teaching experience through martial arts. So that sort of corrected my path, and since then I've been more targeted towards proper training methods and down the coaching and helping others path.
I love it. All right, and I guess I should back up with the next question here. And can you give us just a quick explanation of what exactly parkour is?
Yeah, of course, I'd be happy to. Parkour is a method of training in which you train your body to overcome obstacles, and those obstacles can either be physical or mental, and are often both. So it involves lots of running, jumping, climbing, vaulting, swinging, landing, rolling, that kind of stuff. And more than just a practice, it's a sort of a discipline, which means it can be a philosophy or a mindset. So in addition to going out and jumping on stuff, we also take that mentality of seeking out challenges and we apply it to our entire lives. So, whether it's a job opportunity or whether it's a challenge that we face in our personal lives, the mentality of parkour is to use, obstacles as opportunities to grow. And that's really the heart of parkour.
That's awesome. I love that. So, I mean, you kind of almost answered it with that, but how can, any athlete benefit from, learning some parkour skill? I know, when I took the classes and then I went trail running, I found it, I could I could feel myself doing stuff a little bit differently, even just after one, class.
Yeah, Molly, I wouldn't even know where to begin in terms of some of the benefits you can have. I mean, it's pretty much endless. I mean, you've got the agility, and you've got the body awareness, and you've got the strength and the power that comes from parkour training, and all that can apply to so many sports because it is a very whole body activity. And even if your physical abilities are already where you want them to be, that mentality that I mentioned is just as vital and just as valuable, because you can use that mentality to overcome challenges, whether you're a volleyball player or you play ping pong or whatever you do. So that's really important. And above all, overcoming fear is a core value of parkour. And fears are, they really inhibit people in all activities in all areas of life. So having that ability of knowing what and how your body reacts to fear gives you a real advantage in anything you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Peter, I think I'm just going to start, instead of mountain bike training, I'm actually just going to do parkour and then just race mountain bikes.
Probably help. I mean, some of the stuff like especially the precision hops and stuff, like where people are hopping like onto handrails and stuff, would be,
yeah.
I think probably, I mean, even just jumping, stairs or from heights and stuff would be, in some ways similar.
Yes, no, that's absolutely true. It's people, I think, are unaware of how able their brain is to adapt to these skills. I mean, you think about how on earth does the human brain even calculate the distance of a 1-inch handrail and be able to, judge and execute the power exactly necessary to land on it? But it can. It's fully capable of it. We just usually don't use it to its full level.
Absolutely.
What about trail runners? Do you have any trail runners that work in parkour so that when they're out on the trail, their skill capacity or their precision is so much beyond what a trail would present?
Which I guess is almost exactly what Chris McDougall was doing in Natural Born Heroes.
Yes, no, that's absolutely correct. I don't have any students who are explicit trail runners, but I have a lot of students who enjoy trail running. I was just trail running this past Saturday morning, and it's obviously it's a lot more fun, but because it has that challenge mentality, you're motivated by jumping over logs and going up and down hills, and it does share that philosophy. Yeah,
for sure. I think that's super. It's super cool, and it's amazing to me, even being in the class the first time, actually what you said about the handrail, we were doing some of that, and I couldn't believe what I could do when, I just tried to do it and didn't just freak out about it.
Yeah, and that curve doesn't stop. Well, even advanced practitioners surprise themselves when they're capable of doing it. It's really quite amazing.
Yeah. So on that note, what are some of the, I guess, like couple key moves in parkour if you had to kind of break it into a few key movements?
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge diversity of techniques and movements in parkour because the idea is to take an environment or a series of obstacles and adapt your movement to them. So it's almost like every day new movements and techniques are being created in order to adapt to a new environment. So, the list of techniques and specific moves, if you want to call them, could be endless. But if you wanted to categorize them, I mean, you could say we run, jump, and climb, and you could say we vault, jump, and land. There's general ways to explain it, but the techniques are endless. They branch out upon themselves exponentially. Yeah,
for sure. And okay, when I was at the class, there were a lot of people, I'm going to get into the what equipment must I have question. When I was there, it was a lot of people in like baggy white, almost like martial arts type pants and tank tops. If I don't show up in that, am I going to get kicked out?
Well, it depends where you go. There's some pretty good people. No, I'm kidding. Absolutely, you could essentially train in anything, and I'll give you a couple of examples. Certainly, you're correct. The stereotype parkour person will have a pair of baggy sweatpants on, and they'll be wearing a t-shirt or a tank top or something along those lines, depending on the weather. And then they'll have some sort of form of athletic trainer or sneaker, but anybody can train. I mean, people will be wearing shorts. People will be wearing jeans and pants. I know a few very, very incredibly skilled coaches and athletes who go out in khakis and normal sort of everyday casual pants and train in them because why not? Nice. And some people train barefoot, and some people train in really thick shoes, and some people train in really thin shoes. And while I have my personal preferences, and there are sort of general knowledge that's accepted, like thinner shoes are better for sensitivity and will teach you better technique, and thicker shoes are maybe have a bigger risk of ankle injury but will protect your feet from impact a little more. There's all that knowledge out there, but if you're a new student and you're trying to get involved in the class, you can wear pretty much anything that's comfortable and you'll be absolutely accepted.
Nice. And then where is the best practice place? And I feel like I know what you're going to say here, but indulge me.
Reading my mind, Mom. Yeah, I mean, are you talking about locations, or are you talking about like finding a community?
I guess actually both. Like one would be, I guess, just practicing on your own solo, but then also how do you find a community?
Sure. Yeah, we call them spots. We look for training spots, and it's a tricky one, particularly in America, where liability is a bit of a concern. You can't just walk up to any property in the world and start jumping around on it because you might get a security guard who comes out and goes, "Hey, you're going to sue us if you fall, so you're not allowed to be there." And you really can't argue with that. I mean, that's their responsibility and it's their job. So there's a sort of cultural understanding across the mature parkour communities that when you're asked to move away from somewhere, you just respectfully do so and not try to make a big deal about it. After all, it's their property. But in a similar fashion, the cultural expectation is when you train somewhere, you try to leave it cleaner than when you arrived. So, for example, if I'll teach a group class, part of our cool down jog might be to actually run around the school once and pick up as many pieces of trash as we can find and throw them in the garbage before we leave. So there's that mentality about where to train, and we hope that helps us. With that said, I think you can usually go to any sort of public park, and elementary schools or high schools, when they're not in session, usually have playgrounds that are open to the public. Those types of places are usually pretty friendly. And that's where a lot of the common group sessions will end up being.
Yeah. Okay. And do most parkour places not have one standardized gym, if I'm understanding that right?
Parkour gyms are definitely popping up because it allows you to consistently teach classes year-round, regardless of the weather, and always know that you have equipment there. And of course, insurance companies really like 4 walls on the ceiling, so that's helpful. But it's certainly not required. For years, the community here in the Lehigh Valley was strictly an outdoor-based community. We never had any indoor classes. The only indoor classes I teach even now are children's classes. All of my adult classes are outside whenever the weather allows. So it's absolutely not necessary, but you will see a lot of gyms popping up. And there's pros and cons to training outside and inside. Both are good.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I guess that kind of answered the question, but how do I find people to train with? And I mean, I guess you can talk a bit about Parkour Generations, because I know especially as adults, it's sort of hard to just stumble into a class like that without feeling, super awkward and nervous.
Oh, there's no question. It's definitely difficult to begin, and that's why it's so important to find a community that has a qualified coach. And I couldn't possibly emphasize that more. If you're just looking for people to train side by side with, you can usually Google the name of your city and the word parkour, and you'll probably find a college club or some group of friends who have gotten together. But if you're lucky, you're going to find a professional community with qualified and certified coaches. And if you want to train next to somebody, you just Google your city and hope that you find other people who train. But if you're looking for qualified coaches, people who can actually guide and lead you through really proper training and sort of take you on the correct path, a really good place to start is the ADAPT network. And ADAPT is the name of a coaching qualification program. So if you go to adaptqualifications.com, you'll find more information on that qualification process.
Okay.
So it's a really excellent coaching certification. That's the only one in the United States that's endorsed by the American Council of Exercise. And that coaching qualification has a very expansive network, not just in the U.S., but across the world. And all of those coaches have gone through a fairly rigorous process in order to gain that certification, which means that when you go to a class of theirs, you can rest assured that it's actually going to be a good class that's safely done and well planned, and above all, it's welcoming and warm, which is what you need to feel when you're somebody starting with a brand new activity.
Yeah.
And is that's a parkour certification?
Yes, that's correct. There's certain qualifications that you need to fulfill to take the course. There's level 1, there's level 2, and level 3. Level 1 is assistant coach, level 2 is a full coach, and level 3 is a master coach. And so if you find a level 2 coach somewhere, that person has been through a rigorous testing process. And I would eat my hat if that person did not teach an excellent class and provided you amazing experience. So if you can find an ADAPT qualified coach, those people are going to give you something special.
I'll agree with that, and I'll say the one class I did go to, I guess there was a level 1 coach that was in the class, like doing some of the coaching and participating partially. And I talked to her a bunch about the qualification process, and she put in a lot of time to even just get to the level 1. It was crazy.
Yep, and that's just the assistant. You're not even allowed to coach by yourself when you're a level 1. And level 2 is incredibly intensive. Our passing rate so far in the United States is below, I think, 40%.
Wow.
So it takes a lot to get all the way through that process to be your own standalone coach.
So I'm wondering on this topic of where to practice, is there, with something like salsa or something like that, you could go to South America and it'd be like, that's like the salsa, like Cali, Colombia or something, like you could go and like immerse yourself. Is there a place like that? Like, is the UK the place to go for parkour, or like where could you go if you really wanted to immerse yourself in parkour?
Oh boy, that's a tough one. I would tell you, there's a few cities where the parkour activities are incredibly intense, and it depends where the culture allows for it. So in America, there are cities like Colorado, where parkour has really grown very strong roots. Pennsylvania is also becoming one of those states. There's a lot of communities in Texas. DC as well has old roots planted there. They've been there a while. And then outside the U.S., London is an excellent place. There's an incredible parkour base there. You could go to some of the cities on the outskirts of Paris and France, like Nice and Évry, where the art originated, and you will see a lot of people practicing. So it sort of depends every country has developed its own culture for parkour training. So depending on which culture you want to immerse yourself in, you can sort of choose which one you'd like to immerse yourself in.
Yeah. Awesome. And then kind of back to the coaching a little bit. You talked earlier about how you got started with just watching videos and trying it. So why would someone want to not do that and opt for probably at least going to a couple of classes to sort out some of the moves?
Yeah, and that's because a sort of balanced training approach is really, really important.
Mm-hmm.
It's a strange thing to say, what I'm about to say, but it's a fact, which is parkour is the practice of parkour, the execution of parkour is by definition a destructive activity for your body, which means you do nothing but jumping and landing and doing all the stuff that you see on videos. Your body's going to eventually break down and become injured and chronically injured and fatigued. And I mean, this is coming from a professional who coaches us for a living, so
Yeah.
I'm being you. But so in order to not have that happen to your body, you have to balance it out with an effective training methodology that includes conditioning, strength, endurance, and power conditioning, as well as good recovery training, which means that you're taking care of your body, resting it, feeding it the nutrients that it needs. So you need a holistic approach to your training in order to really do it in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
A great example is one of my students is in his 40s. He's lost about 50 pounds and counting, and it's completely changed his lifestyle. But he's able to continue training even with all the young guns in the class because he's approached his lifestyle in a balanced way. Because he's eating well and he's exercising well and he's doing things to make sure that his longevity is in place so that he can continue to enjoy this training methodology for the rest of his life. So coaches are experienced in guiding you through that process, and there's no way to know how to do that when you're just following a tutorial that you found on YouTube.
Sounds kind of like downhill mountain biking.
Yeah, for sure.
No, yeah, you must be right, because I've seen those videos and I have no idea how to get to being that good. I'm sure if I tried, I would fall really badly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So okay, getting into that normal training week, if you do have a coach, what does a normal training week look like for somebody that's, trying to get a little, get in shape, lose weight, like that guy you just mentioned?
Yeah, I think a good healthy routine, if you're just sort of trying to enjoy parkour and have a balanced activity, would be something like maybe 3 or 4 days a week of training, and training could be a few hours a day. I mean, it could be 1 hour, it could be 4 hours. It just depends how intense you want that training to be.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you need, a good diet and making sure that you're feeding the body the nutrients that it needs. And you need a couple days of rest and stretching and tissue massage and that sort of activity to balance out the muscular sort of tension you're putting yourself through while training. And that's a pretty healthy activity. And there's such a diversity of things you can do within your training. You can go balance on a rail if you want to relax. You can do a bunch of push-ups if you don't want to relax. You can focus on cardio, or you can focus on endurance. You can work on your technique. You can try to overcome your fear. The list is endless, and that's why there's sort of no excuse to do some form of training, because there's so many ways to do it.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. It kind of combines, like a yoga class with a strength training class with like a high intensity boot camp class with like a low level cardio thing, just depending on how you want to play
right.
it.
It's like a buffet of exercise choices, but the whole thing's fun.
Yeah. Now, to get into it, I mean, would you normally try to suggest somebody getting reasonable? Is there a reasonable level of shape someone should be in to start it, since it is, as you said, kind of damaging?
No, absolutely not. You do not need to be in any specific shape in order to begin your parkour training. You just have to begin your parkour training in a wise manner. So, if you have joint pain, or if you're, overweight to the point of you find it difficult to move in an agile way, you just need to start and progress in an effective manner. So you need to do things that don't hurt and that you can do safely and effectively, and build from that foundation. So it doesn't matter where you are. Parkour can adapt to your, level of fitness or level of activity. You just have to be patient with yourself so that you're not rushing through it. And that's the case no matter how good you are.
Yeah, for sure. And then, I mean, I guess I can tell Peter's, obviously his mind is turning. Can you do competitive parkour? These are the important questions.
Yes, the answer is yes. You can. There are parkour competitions out there, and they've been on television shows in the past. And sort of the American Ninja Warrior has sort of taken the frontal stage of competitions because it's a good format, and parkour applies itself well to those types of skills.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll see a lot of experienced parkour athletes on that television show. However, there's a fairly strong current in the parkour community that is somewhat opposed to competitions. And that's because parkour is by definition an individual activity. So, we just spoke about how you have to pace yourself and you have to do things in a way that are safe for you. And the competitive mindset isn't quite on that same, strain of thought. It's more about comparing yourself to others and measuring your performance against the performance of another. And the parkour sort of philosophy or values are somewhat removed from that type of activity. Parkour is a little more zen in the sense that the goal is to, beat yourself every day and find challenges that are challenges for you. And it doesn't really matter if somebody else is better or worse. And so a lot of people sort of really believe that philosophy. And then others are like, hey man, competition's really fun and it's a cool way to get better. So there's schools of thoughts on either side of it. You could meet different athletes who would have different opinions.
Yeah.
But the competitions do exist in our community.
Yeah. It's kind of like competitive yoga, I guess.
Yeah, and it's difficult to measure because as a simple example, some of the guys I train with, one guy might be able to do far better grip strength things than me, but I might be able to jump further than him. But some other guy might have much faster sprints and can do a longer dive into a vault than I can, but maybe I can do better handstands. I mean, it's so difficult to measure because the skill diversity is so far apart that it's almost silly trying to really judge who's the best parkour person because that nobody is the best at everything. There's too many things to be good at.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually what you just said made me think about something. When people think of parkour, I think they often think of people running around doing like crazy backflips and somersaults and stuff like that. Now, is that standard for parkour, or I believe some of the understanding is more that it's just getting very efficiently from place to place using kind of whatever thing you have. So is the answer somewhere in the middle of that, or are both totally obvious?
That's a funny one. And if I wanted to give you the long answer, I'd have to tell you a really long history story. But I'll try to give you the spark notes, if you will. David Bell is credited as being one of the founders of parkour, which is true. He is one of the founders, and his philosophy or the reason he wanted to train was he felt the need to be strong enough that if he needed to help somebody or make a difference in the world, that he could. If he needed to save a life or carry someone across a bridge or swim across a lake to save a life, that was his motivation for training. So whenever he would train, he would create these scenarios, and he would go, okay, if I needed to get to that wall, what would I do? And so efficiency was a very important value for David Bell. Mm-hmm. And because David Bell is revered as the sort of a founder of parkour, many people have followed that philosophy, and they said, okay, parkour training is about being efficient and efficient movement. But efficiency is a funny word because efficiency could be efficiency of time. It could be efficiency of effort. It could be efficiency of safety. It could be efficiency of noise. If someone wants to hold a gun up to your head and say, do a backflip, I think the most efficient way out of that problem is to do a backflip.
Fair enough.
Even though backflips aren't necessarily efficient movement. So it's a complex thing, and it's very philosophically based. But to answer your question more directly, parkour is a training method about overcoming challenge. So if doing acrobatics is a challenge for you and you develop a training method to overcome that challenge, then you've been doing parkour. And if you just want to focus on being a really swift and powerful mover, then that's also parkour. As I said before, it's an individual training path that depends upon your goals and your challenges. So there are some schools of thought that the more acrobatic you get, the more you move away from parkour, but I don't necessarily agree. I think there's plenty of room for acrobatics in parkour, as long as you've got that mentality behind it.
Sure. All right. So you've got somebody new to parkour showing up at the class. What is your best advice for him or her for their first session?
So a really good method to follow is something we call SPRC, which stands for Safety, Progression, Repetition, and Control. And this is something that if I had the power to implement principles simple in the brain of every parkour student in the world. It basically is a guideline, a walkthrough that helps you understand how to train as well as how to achieve particular movements or skills. So you start with step 1, which is S for safety. And this involves things like checking your surfaces, making sure your body is warm and that it's safe and it's not injured, it's ready to go, that the obstacle you're going to be moving on isn't, broken, or that there aren't people in the way, or there's no glass on the ground. All this is sort of considered safety, making sure that this training process is going to go well. Mm-hmm. The second step is P for progression, which means taking things step by step. I know we've talked about that earlier in this little chat. But obviously you want to progress so that you're not advancing further than what's natural for your body. Mm-hmm. And progression could be a 5-minute process or it could be a 5-year process. It depends what the goal is. The third step is repetition, and that sort of speaks for itself. We often say that a great athlete doesn't do a movement until they can do it well. They do it until they cannot do it poorly. And so you want to drill a movement until your body just knows exactly how to do it, even when you're not thinking, because you want to be able to be in that state of flow when you are accomplishing that movement. So repetition is the tool to get there. And the last letter is C, which stands for control. And control is the goal, I like to say. Whenever we are working towards a skill or a movement, we want to be in complete control of that movement so that we're doing exactly what we intended to do. So safety, progression, repetition, control. If you follow those steps, you can achieve just about anything, depending on how much time you have.
I like it. All right, I have another one here, kind of about that. But so if someone can't necessarily get to a class, are there a couple of maybe key training drill type things that someone could be working on, like until they can find a class or get to one? Like we talked a bunch about rail balancing, like that's come up a few times. So
yeah, there's a lot of information out on the internet, and much of it is very, very good information. So if you go to like the website of a qualified parkour community and you see that their coaches are certified and that they're doing the right things and they have a good reputation, many of those websites have sort of like get started beginner tutorials, and they'll give you basic information like here's some exercises to warm up and here's some basic tips for learning the basic techniques, and all that information is really valuable. You can also go on YouTube and search for things like parkour warm-up drills or parkour upper body conditioning or parkour jumping technique tips, and you'll get lots and lots of really great stuff. The only thing you have to be careful of is building bad habits. They say practice makes perfect, but I disagree. I think practice makes permanent, which means if you aren't paying quite enough attention to what you're doing and you go out and you go through SPRC and you're repeating a movement 100 times and you think you're doing great, but you're building in a bad habit, then that's more work later. So that's why having a coach is valuable, because they have the experience to watch you and make those corrections. But if you don't have access to a coach, there is a lot you can learn.
Yeah. Do you have any particular favorites as far as warm-ups or drills go?
Oh, I think one of the timeless elements of parkour training that you can utilize is something we call QM, which stands for quadrupedal movement, which is moving on all fours. So if you look up QM or quadrupedal movement on the internet, you will see an endless amount of variations, and all of them are amazing. And that's because QM uses a huge amount of muscles in the body. It's using your legs and your core, your back, your arms, often both sides, anterior and posterior sides of your muscle chains, and it's no impact, which means you don't have to worry about the sort of joints, long-term problems that you might be dealing with if you're working on jumps or vaults or wall runs or any of that other stuff. So QM is an excellent way to warm yourself up, to do some conditioning, to work on your cardio, and to build that body awareness. It's an excellent activity and an excellent drill.
Nice. Outside of that, is there maybe one cool move that I could do to make it look like I know what I'm doing if I'm showing up at a parkour class? Like, how can I impress everyone? Maybe not the coach, but like everybody else in the class that doesn't really know everything.
I hear you. Just put on a little bit of a show real quick.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, obviously we promote humility and honesty, but with that said, I guess I'll also give you one cool technique that's a lot easier than it looks. We call it a lazy sit. and it's essentially where you're standing in front of a rail, so you're facing it, you're perpendicular to this rail, and you grab it with one hand, and essentially you can take both of your legs and you swing them up on top of the rail. They go over the rail, almost like you're going to land on the other side. In a pendulum motion, instead of landing, you swing them back over the rail again, so you end up turning 180 degrees. It's a little difficult to explain, but if you look up a lazy sit on the internet, you'll see the motion. It looks really, really cool, but it's a fairly simple movement. It's once you sort of get the timing of it, it's not complex at all, and most beginners could learn it in a small period of time. So
Nice.
if you do look it up and you want to go practice it somewhere that looks safe, I think you might impress a few beginners. But that you also have to ask yourself, if the beginners are feeling comfortable, because they don't know that move. That's why obviously humility is the goal in class, but learning some cool moves is certainly a good confidence booster as well.
Yeah. Well, if you see someone show up to one of the Lehigh Valley ones that does that, you can safely assume that it's probably me. So...
All right. Keep that in mind.
All right, next thing, and we're almost done here, but what's the best way to avoid getting injured in parkour?
Yeah, the injury rate is incredibly low in parkour. I myself have never done anything worse than sprain an ankle in 10 years of training. And in about 6 years of coaching, I've seen a couple sprained ankles. I've seen one broken wrist from a bad fall, and that's it. So I challenge any football coach to beat that. Pretty good injury rate. But in terms of avoiding getting injured, it's really about building a good we call it body armor. Conditioning is a crucial element of training, and it serves two purposes. We call them the two P's of conditioning, which are performance and protection. So obviously, through conditioning, you can become stronger and faster and more powerful, and that helps you perform parkour. But as I talked about, when you're dealing with the impacts of this dynamic movement that you will be doing in parkour, your body also needs protection from that amount of force. And so conditioning can serve to build a muscle frame that allows you to sort of have a body armor against those forces. So a good conditioning routine is going to help you get injured. Good body awareness is going to help you to avoid getting injured. And last, but probably most importantly, is a high level of discernment. You have to know when, it's time to take on a challenge, and you have to know when maybe that challenge is a little bit too much for today, and to walk away. So discernment and a good, strong body.
Nice. Last question from me. Is there any weird or surprising etiquette that somebody should know when going to a class?
Yeah, there are probably some strange cultural elements to parkour. I think we've already talked about the poofy sweatpants that you will certainly see in classes. A pretty thing. If you join a class as a complete beginner wearing like Aladdin pants and a pair of thin Asics sneakers and you've got a T-shirt on that says parkour on it, people are going to be very confused why you're not moving like an experienced professional because you're dressed like one. But no, I mean, I think we try to be pretty open and friendly in our communities, which, helps people from feeling like there's things they don't know or that they're outside the culture. But there are some little things. If you join a Parkour Generations class, or most of the ones in France or around the UK, we have a sort of a strange handshake. It's almost like the Roman handshake where you grab each other's forearms as opposed to doing a normal handshake. So that's a sort of a strange cultural thing that in the Parkour Generations communities we do.
Oh
so
my
maybe
gosh.
be prepared.
A person from my high school just made so much more sense to me all of a sudden.
Oh, that. It all came together for you.
There we go.
Well, and that's even a move that if you could come into class knowing that this was going to happen,
That's
then that
true.
would also be a move where you could be humble, but then also fit in and not be one of the noobs as much.
Yeah, it helped you feel like you're a part of it. But you don't have to announce anything. You're just fitting right in exactly. So if you do train with a Parkour Generations branch, or even a lot of the communities who are associated with Parkour Generations and enjoy their culture and training, many of them will do that forearm handshake. So by all means, join us. It's not an elite special club. It's just sort of a thing we fell into. Nobody really knows why, but we all do it now.
I like it. Peter, do you have anything else?
I guess one thing that sort of stuck out is going back to one of the first questions. We talking about what parkour was, and you talked about how it was very mind, body, and overcoming challenges and stuff. Does anything stick out for you, like why parkour more than another sport, say trail running or football or something? Like why is parkour different in how it approaches that mind-body connection? I don't know if that's a way you approach it in class or in the teaching, or just what sets it apart as far as making it more of a philosophy and something that's brought into life.
Yeah, I'm pretty passionate about that topic, and I appreciate that question more than I can say. I'm going to answer that question in a roundabout way, if you'll forgive me.
Absolutely,
love it.
There was a study done at I believe it was a Stanford experiment. It's called the marshmallow experiment. Some people are familiar with it, and it was a study on what they call delayed gratification. Bear with me here. So they would put a marshmallow or a cookie or whatever in front of a child, and they would say, okay, you can either eat this now, or if you wait 5 minutes or wait 10 minutes, we're going to come back and we'll give you a second one. And they studied the behaviors of those children to see how they dealt with delaying their gratification processes. And the results of this study, it was a study done by a guy named Walter Mischel in the 1970s. And the results of this study were that the children, it was a very long-term study. The children that resisted gratification, who said, okay, I'll wait, as opposed to those who ate the marshmallow right away, ended up being far more successful and in their life. They had better life outcomes. They had better school scores. They had better educations. They even had better body mass indexes and a number of other life measures. They were found to be more successful people because they could sort of delay that part of their brain that said, I want what I want right now, and they were able to discipline themselves. And the reason I'm telling that story is, to me, the parkour community and the parkour training mindset is similar to saying no to the marshmallow. It's a training discipline where you are basically putting your body on manual. So instead of going, I'll just walk up these stairs like everybody else, you're going, I'm going to stop for a second, and I'm going to see what I can do with these stairs. And I'm going to experiment, and I'm going to play. And then after I discover what there is to do, I'm going to discipline myself to achieve those things, even though it's going to be very, very hard work. And that's that hard work ethic that builds you towards achieving something that's meaningful, that's sort of powerful to yourself, overcoming your own sort of inner demons and becoming a better person with no other tools except your own willpower is a very profound process to go through. And I truly believe that going through that process leads you to becoming a more successful person in your everyday life. And that, whether it's your personal relationships or whether it's your family life or whether it's your job, whether you train for parkour in 1 year or whether you do it for your whole life, I do believe that process of disciplining yourself and training yourself to achieve those goals, even if it's really hard and even if you don't get there right away, is profoundly powerful and impactful to a person's character. And that's why I do what I do. And that's why I love parkour, because I've seen that change in people.
I think that's a great answer. I mean, I think other sports would have that element, and I was just sort of thinking through, that sounds sort of like, people talk about the army or military, or they'll talk about martial arts in a similar way. But I think, to me, what sets you apart, and you can agree or disagree, is that the sport is so portable and open to context and interpretation, whereas, if you're karate, you could argue, I guess it could go, but you pretty much have to go to a proper place to fully practice a lot of martial arts.
Yeah.
Whereas, we can be outside. It sounds like you prefer to be outside. You can be, you could be someone with a low level of fitness and you could participate. You could be anywhere, right? It could be part of your day.
Yeah, absolutely. And coming from a martial arts background, I have a similar passion for martial arts. I have a similar passion for essentially any discipline. I think being a part of a discipline takes you through this process. But by far, parkour has been one of the most accessible forms of that discipline for people to reach. I mean, if you just look at it, in some of the strangest countries where there are no organized sports whatsoever, you'll see videos of people practicing parkour. And I mean, you've got toddlers and children and seniors and full-grown adults and high schoolers and college students and women and, men, and every demographic you can possibly imagine has an equal shot at being good at parkour. So that's pretty important, as opposed to, as you mentioned, some of those other disciplines, which, while they may be just as impactful, can be more difficult to access.
Absolutely. Awesome.
I think that's really good. I mean, I think that answer, we need to almost go out with that answer, because that's pretty good. I'll definitely link to some of the stuff about the studies and whatnot so that people can research the marshmallow study. And all your other links, of course. Are you on Twitter or anything like that on the socials we can send people towards?
Yeah, absolutely. You can go to Parkour Generations. You can look them up. We're the Americas branch here in the U.S. So if you look up Parkour Generations Americas on Google, you will find us. And we've got Instagram, we've got Twitter, we've got Facebook, the whole deal. So by all means, follow us and follow some of what we're up to. We're obviously very passionate about what we do. And the more you can get involved, whether it's local classes, whether it's workshops, coaching certifications, we do a number of other services that are really cool to help corporations or kids' birthday parties or infiltration, exfiltration processes. You name it, we do it. Anything that we can be helpful with, all that is available online.
It sounds awesome. I'm really interested in this coaching certification. It sounds really good. So
he's just going to now he's going to be a parkour coach.
Well, it sounds like you've gone pretty deep. I'm always interested in the sort of path people have taken, the different certifications and education things. But I mean, it sounds like it's a pretty deep, I always like when the failure rate's high.
Yeah.
I hate when it's like 99.9. It's like, well, that shouldn't be the way tests are. So I like that. So I might be in touch on that.
Right. No, it's a very difficult process. I failed the first time I took my physical assessment for level 2, and it was heart-wrenching, but it's the way it goes. If you're not good enough, you're not good enough, and you've got to work harder to get there.
That was your marshmallow.
Way to be a good standard.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk. This was super cool. It's renewed my desire to keep up with parkour. So, like I said, hopefully we'll be back in and around Lehigh Valley. And
yeah, we'll definitely try and connect down there.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, that would be awesome. You guys are always welcome. We're a family here at Lehigh Valley, and any other Parkour Generations branch, of course, feels the same way. So by all means, please come and hang out with us, join our culture of effort, and we'd be happy to have you.
And we'll know the handshake, so.
Right. You can waltz right in.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And yeah, we'll chat soon.
Thank you, guys. It was a pleasure.
Bye. As always, thanks so much for tuning into this episode of the Consummate Athlete Podcast. Please let us know what you thought about it, how it's impacted you, or changed the way you're training. You can let us know in the comments over at consummateathlete.com, or you could let us know over Twitter at Molly J. Herford and at Peter Glassford. And of course, if you liked the episode, please leave us a review over in iTunes. That would be super helpful. Thanks so much for tuning in. Have a great week, and we will see you next time.